Alright, welcome back to Archi Lens. Today we're gonna talk about something uncomfortable, which is why markets need fear. Unfortunately, sometimes the best thing that can happen to the market is a bad thing. And when I say bad thing, I mean pressure. Not comfort, not optimism, and no endless confidence. Just pressure. Because simply without the pressure, there is no real opportunities. And strangely, and I know most of you gonna disagree with me on this, that the most dangerous market is not always the collapsing one, but sometimes it is the market where nobody is forced to move. Many people in the market thinks that the distressed sellers are really a problem, but in fact they are not. Not only that, but they are one of the main reasons that the market keep functioning. Because every discounted asset, every attractive entry, every mispriced opportunity usually starts with someone who can no longer comfortably hold. And this is important because without the pressure, most opportunities never appear. Let's think about it for a second, or imagine for a second. If everyone feels confidence, and if everybody feels the prices will go higher, and nobody feels the urgency to sell, then who exactly is selling? And if there is nobody selling, is there a real market anymore? We're gonna have just owners keep waiting for the prices to go higher forever. Therefore, for the market to actually function, you don't need only buyers, but we need disagreement. We need different emotional status. We need also different liquidity situation. And of course, different timelines and different pressure levels. Because markets are not moving or built on certainty. In fact, markets built on friction. And truly friction, what creates the market and what creates the movement. And when I talk about friction and pressure, those can come from different directions. They can come from debt. They can come from liquidity. They can come from, for example, bad timing. Personal issues, divorces, family issues, or for example, their business or their work have, in other words, have an issue in the cash flow. So yeah, different reasons can create the friction and the pressure. But most importantly, once the pressure and the friction enters the system, movement begins. That's why if we for example remove all of that, so we'll have market with no weak participants, market with no urgency, no forced decisions, no fear. What will happen next? What's gonna happen next is nothing. Literally nothing. No meaningful liquidity, no real transactions, no even actual price discovery. So we're gonna have just listings sitting on the market with owners waiting on one side and buyers hesitating on the other side. And everyone watching everyone else. That's why most fragile markets looked perfectly calm. Why? Because underneath that calm, there is actually no transfer happening. Just everyone waiting for someone else to move first. And that's of course creates paralysis. That's exactly why weak hands are not flaws in the system. And when I say weak hands, it also includes the non-believer sellers. And those, the non-believers, they don't believe in the system, in the country, in the region anymore, especially after the regional tension that took place. And of course, they are entitled to their opinion. And we're not here to discuss whether this is right or wrong. In fact, I've learned from my very humble experience that one of the most difficult things to do is to convert the non-believers to believers. Therefore, just keep everyone as they are. Keep the believer and the non-believer. Because if you try to convert the non-believer to believer, you're gonna spend so much time, so much effort, you're gonna convince them, and the ROI is gonna be like very limited and very minimum. I'll give you an example to clear up my point. Imagine an iPhone owner, okay? He's owning, for example, iPhone 12. And you want to convince him to upgrade to iPhone, let's say 16 or 17. You're gonna do like a little bit of effort there, right? You're gonna talk about specs, features, so on and so forth. But here the effort is minimum and the ROI is high. But on the other hand, imagine for example a Samsung owner. Okay, now you want to convince him to buy iPhone 17 or to go to the iOS. That's gonna be much more difficult. And you're gonna spend much more time, much more effort to convince him, and the ROI is not guaranteed as the case of the believer. That's why it's much better to focus on the believers and make them believe more. And on the side, just keep like 10% or even less than that effort for the non-believers. Now going back to our topic, that's why I don't see the weak participants actually flaws in the system or a problem. Matter of fact, I see them as a safety valve or release valve in the market. Why? Because they absorb the pressure by surrendering to it. They convert hesitation into transactions, and they convert fear into actions and potential into movement. And without that, market mechanism slowly loses the ability to function naturally, because assets don't randomly lose value, but value transfers, especially in market cycles. And the transfer happened from those forced to release the pressure to those with the capacity to absorb the pressure. And the people with the ability to absorb the pressure, they usually have capital, they have patience, emotionally stable, and no urgency to sell. And that's why difficult markets often creates biggest long-term opportunities. And the uncomfortable truth is, market with no fear, market with no forced decisions, market with no weak participants is not automatically a healthy market. In fact, it's sometimes a frozen market, because without a pressure, nothing moves. And through Archi Lens, we don't chase the market. In fact, we decode the structure and position within it.